Um, Hello, my name is Abode Adewale. I'm an AI engineer and the founder of iResearch and Afiban Tech Limited. And this is our corporate social responsibility program to assist African university student graduates and young professionals to understand the basics of research. And for the next 3 days, we are going to be going on a very important journey. And we are going to be looking at research from a very critical perspective, and not only that, we are going to be looking at AI powered research in the sense that we are going to be having an interactive workshop. So, the purpose of today's lecture is to set the foundation for research, and we are going to be considering the fundamentals of research in an AI driven world. Now, the first thing is, what is research? And this is a very important question that everybody tends to ask. What exactly is research? And I believe that before we can begin to use advanced AI tools for analytical research, conceptual review, data analysis, data visualization, and all those kind of things, we need to have a very good understanding of what is research. Now, research is a structured process of collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data. And this is very, very important because data is the simple tools that governs our world. And one thing that we do in research is that analyzing. So by the time we interpret data, we'll be able to understand a phenomenon. And in research, you need to understand that a phenomenon is divided strictly into two. We have what we call a natural phenomenon and an artificial phenomenon. But in research, of of an excellent research. And last is that research must be purposeful. What does that mean? We are saying that research must begins with a well-defined problem. That means at addressing a distinct knowledge gap. That's why if you are doing a very standard research, the first thing they are going to ask you is what is your research objective? Number one. Number two is what is your research gap? And these are very, very essential skills that you need to master when you are dealing with analytical research. Now, let's move on. We are going to the second part, which is research methodology foundation. And what does this mean? Research is philosophical. We need to understand that research is philosophical and their practical approach that shapes your research design. Now, there are two aspects to philosophical aspect of research. We have what we call ontology and epistemology. Ontology and epistemology. Please don't forget, whenever we are talking about ontology, we are talking about reality. In fact, the literal Greek word for ontology is reality. So, when we talk about ontology, we are talking about the study of reality. Every research actually must abide with these two. Every research must either be ontological or epistemological. And when we talk about epistemology, what does that mean? It means how do we know what we know? And this is very, very important in research. What is reality and how do we know the reality? Now, under ontology, we have objectivity. What does that mean? It means that reality exists independent of an human thought. For example, when we have the law of physics, biological structure, for example, we have Ohm's law, we have Hooke's law, and all these are objective principles. For example, for people that are not maybe probably science students here, you also benefit from it. When we look at Ohm's law and say that the energy that flows through a metallic conductor is proportional to the potential difference across its ends, provided the temperature and other physical conditions of the metallic conductor are kept constant. That is an objective fact. That is an objective fact. And we have what we call constructive. What does that mean? It means that a reality, sorry, is constructed through human interaction and perspective. And what does this imply? It means that when you're performing a research, an academic research, or you are working for a company, the most important thing is that when you, for example, let's use an e-commerce as an example, you carry out a survey, you collect data from your customer, and you analyze the data. Now, by the time you are analyzing the data, you also need to put into consideration that any data you are analyzing must reflect the true condition of the customer. Now, let's quickly move to epistemological. Don't forget, I'm just trying to set the foundation. And for people that are just joining, please note that this is the first day. By second day, everything will run smoothly. I sincerely apologize for that. We're just trying to set up a lot of things to ensure that we deliver a more quality job. Now, epistemology, under epistemology, we are looking at how do we know what we know. And under epistemology, we have positivity. What does that mean? It means that you can gain knowledge through an observable, measurable fact. Now that's why under this you can carry out you can use what you call a quantitative data and statistical proof. For example, when you collect data from your customer, maybe you are working in an e-commerce firm, you collect data and you begin to use statistical method to analyze the data. Now we have interpretative. What does that mean? It means that knowledge, you can gain knowledge from understanding human experience and meaning. You see, these are philosophy, this philosophy of research, such that when you look at a natural phenomenon and you interact very well with, with that natural phenomenon, you can be able to gain knowledge by understanding human experience with that natural phenomenon. For example, as a form of reflection, if you are studying the impact of the new tax law that is passed in Nigeria on small business, is your approach going to be a positive approach or an interpretative approach? Just think about it. But the right answer is that it can be both. Now, let's move into a very important section. How do you choose your methodology? Is very important. How do you choose your methodology? Now, under methodology, we have three methods of carrying out methodology, three types of methodology. We have what we call a quantitative methodological approach. What does quantitative means? The core focus of quantitative is that you are testing theory. Now, when you're working with a vast amount of data, the most important thing you need to understand is that when you analyze data, you are identifying patterns. For example, in machine learning, by the time we are training it, maybe with 80% data and 20% data is control. One of the things we do with that 80% data is to identify patterns. Patterns is very, very important. Please note that under quantitative methodology, we have what we call numerical data. That is the first one. We have survey, we have secondary data set, and we have sensor. For example, you will notice that modern day CCTV has sensor attached to them. And from those sensors, you can be able to get data that you can